In this channel we like to talk about cars, probably to an unhealthy degree, but in my habit of squeezing the most out of terrible cars such as the Ford Ka, which if you want to see me drive one for 9 hours, you should sign up to my Patreon. We are getting closer to our goal of 50 Patreons, and we have already celebrated after meeting our first goal of 25 Patreons last week. If you wish to join them, the link is in the description. I tend to forget how most people see cars as mere transportation, which is usually the role cars serve in Sandbox games. I find there is some sort of crossover with car enthusiast and Sandbox games, even more so when one traces their origin to the Driver series, a game which might deserve its own video, even if it has been covered to death here on YouTube. But we aren't talking about Driver today, because there's another PS1 title which is probably closer to Grand Theft Auto, and yet nobody in this platform or the internet talks about it. World's Scariest Police Chases was released in June 2001, and it seems like a usual shovelware title at first sight. It even has the title of a TV show to go along with it. However, behind this touchy presentation hides one of the best open world experiences in the PS1. It is time to start the story mode and unveil this hidden gem. The first mission serves as a tutorial, in the shape of a training course for police officers in the fictional city of Ashland. Most of these assignments focus on teaching the player how to drive, which is kind of vital given all of the gameplay takes place while driving. There are no clunky on-foot sections like another Sandbox title for the PS1. Back to our training montage, handling in this game isn't remarkable. It's not bad by any means, and I never encountered any moment where I felt hampered by physics. Just be careful with jumps. While it isn't a bad approach, brakes in this game take to make the car drift, which is balanced by the fact engine braking is ridiculously effective, so lifting the accelerator tends to slow the car down enough to make tight turns without losing control. For the most part, cars behave well under throttle. Sure, one could say the steering is a bit sensitive at high speeds, but I find this is an accurate feature which one should expect anyway. You can tell these cars have really soft suspension, which is weighted to recreate the classic police chase feel. Then again, I don't think there's any situations where I had to change lane at top speed in a sudden manner. Despite how low the draw distance is, which is a staple of the PS1, there's always enough room to pass. Maybe it's the fact I'm playing with an emulator which allows me to see properly, but this game felt claustrophobic with a CRT and PS1 back in the day. Or maybe it's the fact I was a children and I couldn't drive. While driving is a vital skill, it isn't the only one required. In order to stop suspects, one has to be more persuasive at times. Our training takes this in mind, and it has a section where one has to stop a car by ramming into it. This is the second mission of the game, and the driver ahead is pretty good. It even does this slight feint, slightly turning towards the left before doing a hard right turn. Probably more than one fell for this. While crashing into a fleeing suspect is fun, there is a catch. Your car in this game is made of paper. You thought cars in GTA 3 were fragile? Ramming into criminals won't get you anywhere outside a failed mission screen. Thank God there is another tool at our disposal. Weapons. Yes, a PS1 Sandbox where you can use firearms. What is this sorcery? It totally deserves a thumbs up, just like this video. Doesn't cost anything to leave a like. This game has a degree of gunplay as one has to shoot and drive at the same time. While pressing the up arrow in the D-pad will lock into a target, it doesn't maintain the aim on said target. The aim is controlled by your car, meaning it will move as one dodges traffic, turns, and so on. It isn't mindless as one can't open fire indiscriminately. If a couple of bullets land over a traffic car, it will always result in a mission failed screen.
Unit 1, cease fire and return to station. The captain wants a word. You fired a weapon without regard for public safety.
Once our training is complete, we shall be able to drive and fire for the most part, even if the game doesn't really teach you its controls, and it will probably spend a few attempts trying to figure them out. After this, it's time to take our psychological test and oh, I don't need that? Man, those are some good news. I'm so glad my instant desire to attack cones hasn't been repealed, even if my training officer didn't appreciate my behavior.
Officer, you have knocked over too many cones. You have failed this test.
Each mission has their own introduction, and they do a good job at establishing a scene.
A 3-martini lunch has escalated into a boozed-up joyride through a peaceful residential neighborhood. With school out and children at play, police must respond quickly to prevent a terrible tragedy from taking place. There is no room for error when innocent lives are at stake.
Our first assignment is rather simple. A drunk driver is causing mayhem in a residential area in broad daylight. We aren't allowed to use firearms in this case, but playing demolition derby in a residential area is more than fine, until you realize your patrol car will be out of commission before this drunk driver. The trick to pass this mission lies in the blue bar at the bottom of the screen. The red bar always signals the health of the target, but this blue bar works as a, let's call it, pressure gauge. By remaining close to the target with your sirens turned on, this bar will start to fill. Once it's completed, the target will stop and the mission will pass. This is another mechanic which the game doesn't mention under any circumstances. It really makes sense that minor criminals crack under a certain amount of time, and it makes sense that our first targets are minor criminals. Our next target for mission 6 is a car thief who decided to steal a car in rush hour during the morning. Given there are civilians in the car, we aren't allowed to fire at it. This mission has a small beginner's trap as the fleeing car thief is driving in the opposite lane of the highway, and one can't cross once the chase triggers. You have to drive in the opposite side of the highway and then pull a U-turn to start chasing this car thief. He isn't the most clever driver, crashing a lot while cutting through this park. I do wonder who wants a wrecked car. I suppose it doesn't matter when the game doesn't have damage for their crashes. This is another chase where one shouldn't spend their time crashing into the suspect because your car will turn into white and blue scrap metal. Instead, remain close to the suspect and he will give up after a while.
The punk with no respect for other people's property will now become someone else's property in the city jail.
I couldn't have said it better. I agree. The next mission changes things, as we are patrolling the streets at night and we got officers requesting for backup as they are under fire. Usually these missions follow a pattern in which one has to reach a certain place in a limited amount of time, which can be rather tight in some cases. Even with a clear drive you will still be too close for comfort, so don't panic and focus on driving, because that's all there is to it. The same logic applies to pursuits too, as losing your target is quite easy. While this mission allows you to stop this armed criminal by chasing them, we are finally allowed to open fire on a target. Of course I resort to the most violent approach and turn this sedan into a brown block of cheese. But this mission isn't over, as you have to retrieve a weapon which is dropped at random during the chase, which is in a tight timer once again, but it's nothing impossible. For the next mission, our burger break is interrupted by a deranged bus driver who decided to kidnap its passengers after losing his family and job. Another mission where one can't respond with violence, which is unfortunate. At least it's really easy to follow the bus because it makes all sorts of mistakes, which means these passengers will enjoy a brief and bumpy joyride, while our driver will spend a long time in jail. After these mundane assignments, it seems our officers have graduated to other sorts of police work. This mission starts by following a dealer of quality yet forbidden substances. Yep, this is a tailing mission, a long tailing mission. You got to follow this coupe for 4 minutes, and if it pulls away, it's back to the start. I wouldn't say this is hard, however it can be slightly unforgiving as this suspect can pull away and force a restart. Of course, one wants to be careful and remain close, until the black coupe breaks and fails the mission once again. I find the most troublesome area is the highway, as for some reason the suspect gains an absurd boost for a brief moment. Try to remain close through the tunnel to avoid losing it. Our chase continues until our suspect reaches the harbor area and meets a client in a limo. Once the deal takes place, the chase is on. This is the first time where a suspect will fight back by firing at us. I don't find this is a threat for the most part, as they don't cause enough damage to stop you. It's no match for a shotgun, which can get you in trouble as it has a degree of spread and can reach traffic cars by accident. If you're too concerned, you can use the handgun instead, but if you remain close and keep firing on this suspect, he will stop in no time. All that remains is retrieving the evidence dropped by your felon. It has to be said this mission has no checkpoints, so if you fail at the second stage, it's back to 4 minutes of tailing. You really want to stop this guy at the first chance you got while driving a cab. This mission makes you drive a cab as an undercover cop, which isn't too different from the usual patrol car you will drive. That is a theme with this game, as all cars seem to have the same top speed and handling, outside very specific cases which we will cover once we see them. Another rainy day takes place in the city of Ashland, but there are no criminals to catch this time. There has been a traffic accident at rush hour this morning, and it's up to us to escort an ambulance to the nearest hospital. But first, we got to reach the accident area, and this timer is tight. It does make sense given the severity of this incident. There is no time to fool around here, as even the smallest time loss might end in a restart. This is probably the first time where the car given to us feels slow, especially when driving through these long straights. Top speed feels like a holiday cruise. I suppose rain plays a small factor in handling. The car feels slightly loose, but I don't find it's enough to change the difficulty. It probably makes braking more sensitive, which is why you want to lift off and use engine braking instead. Even if this strategy can prove challenging for those who don't know the map, even the green indicator doesn't turn gradually, instead moving suddenly, which doesn't give you much time to make the turns without slamming the brakes and losing too much speed. After some considerable attempts, we will reach the accident area where the second part begins. We got to escort this ambulance to the hospital, which is very far and we don't have much time to get there. Even more so when one considers the ambulance has to follow us and it's possible to break away from it, which means it will stop in the middle of the road and we have to go back so it can see us again. You can fail this multiple times, which means it's back to the previous driving stage once again, creating this loop which isn't exactly pleasing. Thing is, there is a trick to this mission, a trick which the game itself tells you. Upon reaching the ambulance, a small cutscene will play and the ambulance driver will mention there are 2 hospitals to choose. If you open the map and zoom in, all sorts of icons will appear through the city, which indicate different buildings. Turns out there is a hospital which is way closer and the game automatically indicates the farthest one. Once you discover this and route your way towards the closest hospital, this mission is much easier, even if I got lost for a brief second trying to find the entrance here, but I'm certain that won't happen to you. It seems we have reached a stage where timers are vital, as the next mission has us running across town because we have a nutjob who decided to play Bomberman in broad daylight, in some sort of pathetic revenge plot against this city, and it's up to us to disable these gifts. Does make me wonder why it's up to us to solve every single crisis in this city. There are no other units available? It seems this police force has been successfully defunded to the point where we only have 2 officers in service. Well, I suppose everything is sunshine and rainbows outside. Oh, right. This mission isn't easy. There are 4 different targets to defuse and timers aren't generous. It all boils down to a skill which isn't too common in games nowadays, routing. There is no GPS to carry you and one has to manually craft the perfect route to defuse all the targets in the given time. The first one should be the furthest one at the right, which is the fire department. Next comes the closest to the police department. You shouldn't tackle this one first because it will force you to defuse the fire department afterwards. This is a mistake as the last 2 packages are too far and there's not enough time. The third one is located inside a park which can be difficult to access and will probably force a restart at the very least. The final one rests in a bank which is near impossible to reach in the given time, so I do advise some patience. However, once this final package is defused, we have solved another crisis. That is, if you manage to master the handling of this truck. You like brake to drift? Then you will adore this thing. If you are a normal human being, you will despise it. At least we have something normal for the following mission. Once again, we return to undercover work, until we are interrupted by a peculiar band which has ungodly camouflage skills. Totally won't notice you there. Turns out this is a media crew looking for a headline, and they want to record our undercover work. This is a risky affair, which is why we got to lead this news crew away from us. Given we have to get back to our starting point, it is a good idea to lose them early. The usual chase follows afterwards as we need to stop another suspect. By now, suspects don't really feel intimidated by the sound of our siren, and there's no other resource but weapons to stop them, even if my aim was terrible this time, but I had enough ammo to stop them anyway. We remain in the same brown sedan for the following mission. This time we have to transport an informant from prison to the courthouse, in the middle of a stormy night. Our precious cargo has brought some attention as 2 cars start to chase us after hitting the highway, and these guys are desperate as they will crash into us and fire at the same time. One car is dedicated to ramming and the other remains behind and fires at us. This one is relatively benign as they don't have enough firepower to cause any serious damage. No, the problem lies with the absolute madman who rams into you without a brake. It's like a goat with 4 wheels who wants to headbutt everything inside, and it gets annoying really fast. For one, it's almost impossible to break away from this driver as it rubber bands, raising its speed to a ridiculous degree, meaning it will always be there to ram you whenever one has to turn. Not that there are many turns in this route, and no, there's nothing you can do to destroy these cars. I tried, believe me. So the only option is running. Your best bet lies in this driver making some sort of mistake so you can cover extra distance before taking serious damage. This is the only way I've been able to pass this mission. It's the first mission which I found frustrating in this game because it boils down to luck, but it's possible. So fair enough game, I'll let it slide for now. Or maybe I ignored it because this disappointment is followed by the best mission in the game. Mission 14. 2 members of the army have taken a tank each and started to cause mayhem through the city of Ashland. And guess who has to stop them? The army? No, of course not. Police officers with regular firearms. Then again, it might not be an issue given this M16 is causing serious damage to this tank. Just those Chinese tanks aren't so scary. This first tank is a challenge as one has to stop it before it reaches the stadium area. If it does, it's game over. In order to achieve this, you need to cause serious damage to the tank until the game allows you to use the rocket launcher. Once it's open season, you got to spam rockets because there's a brief window of time to stop it. Another thing to consider is the fact this tank also fires back at you, and it packs quite a bunch. Once the first tank is stopped, your patrol will probably be a wreck, but there's no need to worry, because we get to use an APC to stop the second tank. The odds are slightly more balanced. Look, I just used an M16 against a tank. Don't expect a realistic outcome here. Truth be told, the APC makes quick work out of the opposing tank. The challenge lies on the first stage where timers are rather tight, but I think we can sleep happy tonight. Or maybe not, since we have a busy night as well. The following mission starts by chasing a bank robber who leads us into an ambush. A returning couple greets us, the two black coupes which turn mission 13 into a lottery. This mission plays in a similar manner outside the outright evil roadblock which forces us to take a longer path to our destination. But funny enough, I didn't find this mission as difficult. Same story for mission 16, where all we got to do is chase and stop a suspect with firearms. Simple stuff for the time being. I suppose we deserve a break, given mission 17 picks up the pace again. Our friend invites us for another round of Bomberman. This mission has the longest drive in the entire game, given we are in the other end of the map. However, the timer is quite generous and it shouldn't be a problem. Only a tedious trip in case of a restart, which you might have to make because the game doesn't explain what to do after reaching the power plant. We got to find the package, and if you come in contact with it... So, you got to stop right next to these markers. It's always the same, the closest to the building itself. With this sorted, we get to open fire in this nutjob and put him behind bars. I found this mission isn't as hard as the previous encounter. Maybe it's the fact mission 11 was my roadblock when playing this game as a child. But once you find the package, the rest is rather pedestrian. Mission 18 is another pursuit, but this time we have to deal with two different suspects at once. I find the best strategy is approaching the closest car at the start, and all you got to do is make quick work of it and take care of the blue band afterwards. And don't hit the spike strip at the start, it does work. Mission 19 has us chasing another blue band while driving a pizza truck. There's nobody else but us in this police department, it's lore, you cannot change my mind about this. This mission is tricky because you don't have enough firepower to stop the band. Every shot counts, and even then, it's back to ramming in order to stop this criminal. It can be a bit random, but I find it's an easy challenge to overcome once you realize what to do. And here we are, it's time to tackle the final mission of the game. Mission 20. Turns out our friend wants to play Bomberman again and has escaped prison. At least the man has class and does it with an armored limousine. We got to unleash all of our weapons against this criminal. We even get a rocket launcher, but I find the M16 is much better against this limousine, which has a habit of weaving and dodging rockets. I do have to end it with explosives, however. There is no other way. And so, the story ends with a wrecked limousine and a pixelated cutscene. I find this is an interesting story mode, even if there isn't much of a story. Bomberman is our only antagonist to speak of, and he has no background outside the revenge plot, which is unfounded. It does have a sense of regression given we start at the police academy and end up stopping tanks. It's fun, and sometimes that is all you need. And this train of thought applies to the second gameplay mode offered in this peculiar game, free roam. We are left to roam the entire city of Ashland, and it finally sinks in. This game map is massive. Exploring this city without timers or GPS to guide you can be tough, as it's easy to get lost. I assume most people find these low polygon buildings confusing, but I believe this game looks quite good for the PS1 era. These were the early days of Sandbox, and I find it looks more pleasing compared to Driver 1. I find there are memorable areas in Ashland's map, and you are motivated to discover them, because these locations count as different starting points for your free roam experience. Some of them trigger funny dialogues as well.
Control, we're now heading west on Collins Boulevard. Donuts.
This place is really fishy.
And you'll be grateful to discover these new places, as cars can take quite a beating, given one has to chase random cars at free roam which act as suspects. It's not obligatory, but it is fun to engage. Usually what I did as a kid was restart as soon as I discovered a new location and start driving a fresh patrol car, and continue with my exploration. Oh yeah, one can choose 4 different cars as their patrol for free roam, or maybe more. See, there is something which I didn't mention about missions. One can receive an award by completing them under a certain fashion. which I never tried because they are hard. These awards unlock different vehicles for free roam, along with weapons and other curious modifiers, such as a Halloween theme where our pedestrians are replaced by skeletons, or a sea theme mode where our officers are wearing diving suits. God, I miss the early days of cheats, they were so absurd. And talking about cheats, yes, you can cheat your way and unlock all of these with ease. I always did this, always. One could also play this with an extra player, a feature which is kind of pointless in today's world, but it was nice having someone dedicated to firing. It allowed you to focus on driving the car, but really, after unlocking 10 locations and playing with extras, the content of free roam is next to nothing outside chasing random suspects. Even if that's fine, I find this is enough to keep the game interesting. The charm lies on the unique missions which I never seen in any other title, from guiding an ambulance at rush hour while it rains, to stopping tanks in broad daylight, and all in a 3D world. For the PS1, being able to drive all sorts of vehicles, fire weapons, and have a story mode all in the same game was unheard of, and it kind of remains that way. Sure, this isn't a perfect game as driving is very pedestrian and there isn't any sort of cohesive plot to tie everything together, but it's fun, and I surely spent hours roaming across Ashland to discover a new starting point and rage at missions which my childish brain couldn't beat. While I had a PC which allowed me to play GTA Vice City, which I did for too many hours, I also played these PS1 titles at the same time, because they were fun, and I think that is enough reason to give it a try and judge by yourself. This knowledge has made its way to you thanks to my supporters at Patreon. We thank them as follows: or amateur racers, professional racers, and world champions: Blaine Dev, See What Happens Racing UK, Whiskey Tuesday, Zendere Kiseli, Enzo Lassonieri, Raciel, Hunter Kaufman, Josh Big, Astin, Crusader Glenn, Jade, Lonnie Murray, Ticecom, Lucky, Matim19, and George. If you wish to support my endeavors as these wonderful people have done, you can find a link to my Patreon in the description of this video. You can enjoy early access to my videos along with a special role on our Discord server. All of this starting at $3 a month. These videos are funded by my supporters. Each one makes a massive difference, and if we reach 50 patrons, I will tackle a 9-hour endurance race with a Ford Ka. With that said, I hope you have enjoyed this video and left a like, or a dislike if you didn't. I'll see you all next time. Take care and bye for now.